My name's Gwen Diagram. So I'm talking about how to win with automation and influence people. You can tweet me at Gwen Diagram, and I'm currently Principal Test Engineer at Sky, although this story is from before that. So, a little bit about me. I organise the Leeds Testing Atelier in Leeds in the UK. It's a pretty fun one-day punk rock conference. Two of the organisers are there. And I'm just about to start the Ministry of Testing Leeds meetup, which is super fun. So if you're ever over Leeds way, give me a shout and we'll hang out and shout about testing, because that's kind of my favourite thing. So, when I wrote the title of this talk, I realised that I should actually read the book, because I'd never actually read it. So the book is called How to Win Friends and Influence People. And it's a really awesome book from the 1930s by a dude called Dale Carnegie. He was an American writer and lecturer, and he spoke about how to be a better person in business and in life, basically, as well. So I listened to the original 1980s recording on Audible, and it's absolutely beautiful. The dude who narrates it has a really old school American voice, and it's just lovely. So if you get a chance, have a listen. So I'm going to be using some of Dale's teachings in slides like this. So when you when you see a slide like this, it's not me, it's Dale. So, how it all started. As things usually go, I had an interview with the other senior tester and the principal engineer. So I asked what automation frameworks were used, and the automation frameworks included Spock, Scala Test, Thucydides, which is now Serenity, JBehave, JUnit, Mocha, Karma, and Cucumber, so a shitload. So I asked what languages were used, and bless their souls, they used fucking Groovy, Java, and Scala. So it sounded like a bit of a mess, which I'm quite into that. It means that it's not going to be boring, but it was actually a lot worse than it sounded. So I joined the front-end team. There were two front-end teams. There was a back-end team, and all three were APIs, but one of the front-end teams also had a website. So it was pretty clunky. And this team that I joined, it was a whole world of Groovy. So it had the API and the website, and both of these were written in Groovy, and we'd somehow managed to find Groovy developers. So it was also a world of Siren JSON. So it was too long to actually put vertical on this screen, but this is a little bit of a taste of Siren JSON. It's Helios, which Helios can be really cool, but in this use case, it wasn't. So what it's doing is it's directing the user to where to go after each interaction with the API. It's pretty difficult to navigate around, and it's even worse to write tests in. So when we looked into the tests, we discovered that there were no acceptance tests running as part of the build. Instead, they had these magical functional tests, which covered a whole shitload of different layers of testing. So when people say functional tests, there's a chance that you're going to encounter some issues because they're not going to be able to describe what those tests actually are. So as part of this, they also had some integration tests, which strangely, they were the functional tests written with, instead of a mock, they were actually testing against the real system. So tests at both layers were exactly the same, and they were both written by developers, and they were just duplicated. So no one could actually agree what functional tests were, which caused loads of arguments. If you encounter this situation, I'd recommend getting the naming of the tests sorted as soon as possible to stop more arguments. So what really happened here is we had loads of slow-running, flaky tests. So at the start of my time there, we had a load of image changes, and so the two front-end developers that we had were working on making really simple code changes and checking in their work. So we had tests running on the build server here, but the issue was that these tests would take half an hour to run. And as they were flaky, they would fail. So when I first started there, it would sometimes require 4 reruns to get the test to pass, even though the developers knew that they'd changed nothing of significance. It would have been really easy to exclude these tests, but doing that encourages bad behaviour. Once one person does it, everyone will start doing it, then you got no tests. So this was pretty bad for the developers, but when I looked into how we were actually going to release this as testers, it was looking even worse. There were some UI layer tests there. They were written in Thucydides over the top of JBehave. So these are both BDD frameworks, and how they were layered on top of each other and why you would do that, I have no fucking idea. But it was really difficult to navigate around and try and pull apart what they were doing. And they ran Selenium as a library as well. So I looked into Jenkins, and these tests hadn't been run in over a year and a half. And so we had absolutely no idea of how most of the system was actually meant to work. There were no tests, there were no unit tests either, and no working UI level tests. Changing things was really quite terrifying. The release system were released in RPM to the test environments, and then 2 testers spent 2 days manually testing different components, not exploratory, manually testing. So I'm really fucking lazy. My testers and I were having lunch one time, and we were talking about how we were different. One of the testers, he's really thorough, he's cool. One of them's so-so, and I'm cowboy as fuck. So I'm not gonna sit there and spend 2 days testing a system manually. It's not my style. So there were also some smoke tests, and these were written in Groovy, but they couldn't be run on the Jenkins box because someone had upgraded Firefox on the Jenkins box to a sensible version, but no one had upgraded Firefox in the test. So the test had Firefox 31, and in the real world, we were on Firefox 46. So these had to be run manually on your machine, and you had to ensure that you had the right version of Firefox. But there were only 13 of these tests, which was quite cool. So, as you can imagine, we had a test team totally champing at the bit to try and get some automation up and running so they didn't have to do all this boring stuff. But they all had really different opinions on how they wanted to do it. So, as testers, we generally write any language, but we always think that the one that we write is the best. So, at the time, we had 2 Ruby testers. We had 2 C# testers, which I was one of. We had 1 Java tester, and we had 1 Python tester. So everyone thinks their language is the best, but we needed a framework that absolutely everyone would use. So, throw down a challenge. We needed to write these smoke tests, and the best way to do this was to throw down a challenge. We would all write it in our different languages that we had and present it to the team. And so we had a mix of Cucumber, Ruby and Selenium, Gauge, Java and Selenium, Cucumber, Java, Selenium, and Cucumber, Python and Selenium. And we gave everyone a week to do it in. So this meant everyone had a totally fair chance on building their frameworks to show everyone else. Now, when I said to show everyone else, this is where it became really unfair, and I didn't think of it until it was actually happening. So we didn't mention that part of building the framework meant that you had to show it to everyone at the end. And our team's really quite large, so there was 60 of us. That included developers, testers, Scrum Masters, DevOps humans, well, ops people, yeah. So the tester that built the framework the best, as she was totally the best coder out of all of us, she was really shy. She had a really unfair disadvantage there, and it really screwed her because it meant that Python wasn't going to be chosen as a language because she couldn't present it back to the team very well, and that really sucked. So merely stating a truth isn't enough. The truth has to be made vivid, interesting, and dramatic. The movies do it, television do it, and you have to do it too if you want attention. So, back to the presentations. We showed our different frameworks and we explained the benefits of each. If you haven't heard of Gauge, it's an open source tool to write test cases in. It's really similar to Cucumber, except it doesn't need to follow the given when then pattern. So I don't really like the given when then pattern because I've never heard anyone talk like that, so I don't see why I should have to write my tests like that either. The only way I can get you to do anything is by giving you what you want. So Gauge also has some pretty amazing reporting, although it doesn't look very amazing up there. Trust me, it's amazing. And working with developers previously, I knew that developers absolutely loved the reporting that came out of Gauge. Cucumber reports at the time were really quite clunky, and they weren't as easy to follow as Gauge. I also knew that we had a whole bunch of JVM developers in the room, even if they focused on Groovy, bless them, or Scala instead of Java, and so Java would most likely win them over. So we all voted, and we chose Gauge and Java as a framework. Perhaps a little bit of luck, knowing what people particularly liked there, helped, or I just chose the right framework to use. It ended up that we had the developers on board with what we were going to be using to write the new framework in. Arouse in the other person an eager want. So it's really quite funny, because testers seem to get to write a whole lot more code than developers, especially when you're backfilling test cases. So here we asked for help from the developers, and they assisted us with implementing the framework. So we made our code more fun to write than the developers were writing for the live stuff, and this encouraged cross-discipline pairing across the team, which built a stronger team. So we had these smoke tests written, which is cool. But these, of course, were the smallest of our worries. So the smoke test didn't stop the testers from doing 2 days of manual testing. So the smoke tests, they kind of actually gave us diddly squat, as they were something that actually ran, even if it was just on your machine, but they ran. And they were a really easy part of the system to tackle. That actual chunk of tests that were really important to this team were the really horrific JBehave Serenity tests that weren't running, and they hadn't been run in over a year and a half. But these were so hard to tackle, they were almost impossible. Several people had looked at these and given up. They were just so messy. So we decided to tackle something else in the meantime. Also, fixing the UI test wasn't for the benefits of the whole team. This was just one little component team. So the rest of the teams, the proxy API and the API layer for the core system, wouldn't have benefited from fixing the UI tests at all. We wouldn't have been able to share knowledge of what we'd done, and so instead we started on the API acceptance tests. However, unfortunately, this wasn't done in the same manner as the choosing of the frameworks. So this was done as a bit more of a solo endeavour, and the problems from this are still around. So don't choose technology as a solo. Also, the problem here was I was writing for the API test for a system that uses Siren JSON, which, as you can see, it's really complex. And DTOs for it were just really difficult to use. You can imagine what it would look like. So we used JSON path, which is kind of like XPath, but for JSON, where the testers that didn't have such a complex, that didn't have such complexity used JSON or Jackson. But this caused all kind of issues. This was pretty much our largest mistake with these frameworks, and we're still paying for it. So we're now looking into JSONiter to solve this, as we basically need to start from scratch in regards to a deserializer. So, because you'd be surprised at how attached people get to all their different libraries. So, we're going to have to replace it entirely. The only way to get the best out of an argument is to avoid it. So we aren't going to solve this issue by people shouting each other down saying that JSON or Jackson is better. And in the end, who actually cares? Libraries move on and get better. Sell the new and don't dwindle on the old. On the topic of JSONiter, the way that we actually found out about this library is through the ThoughtWorks Tech Radar. So one of our contractors spends an hour a month reviewing the ThoughtWorks Tech Radar to see what cool, new and exciting techs come about. But we also use the Tech Radar for more than this though. We've implemented the Tech Radar ourselves, so choices like this won't bite you in the arse. So any proposals for new tools that people want to use, they come through the Tech Radar. And we look at it once a week as the entire development team. When we review pull requests for the Tech Radar that don't actually meet what we want. When we review pull requests in general that aren't things on the tech radar, we can reject them for this reason. Therefore, we can keep our code base really coherent and clean. Which brings us to another section. While I was messing around with that component, there were some really, really large problems going on with one of the other components, which was the API backend. So there were constant arguments about two sets of tests. So the cucumber tests and the gauge tests. The developers in the team, they had unit tests, which was cool. They were way better than the other team for that. So they were pretty organized. And they also had integration tests. And they had the testers writing the acceptance tests. So the integration tests were the cucumber ones and the gauge ones were the acceptance tests. So we had two testers on this team, and then we had none, due to a set of circumstances. So it was about this point in time that it was starting to become really apparent that component teams just weren't working for us because we didn't have any testers on one team, for one thing. So I'd moved into a different team as well. So I'd moved into the proxy API team. And it was really interesting because I was so far away from this system previously that I had to learn how the entire system worked. People were in the same tribe working on pieces of software that interacted with each other, and they had no idea how that component worked at all. So it wasn't just the testers that had this problem either, it was the developers as well. So the developers were writing different languages, and if someone was sitting over the other side of the office, there was a fair chance that they didn't even know them. And we also had a new head of tech join who wanted to make his mark, and I got promoted to test manager because I was the only senior left. So we came up with the idea of feature squads on an away day, and we worked together as a leadership team to work out how this would work. So let the other person feel that the idea is his or hers. So we came back from the away day, and without any planning at all, one of the Scrum Masters presented the idea of feature squads. This was a fucking disaster. So this was beyond a disaster. They were pretty much riots. So the way it was presented to the team was in this overcomplicated diagram, and everyone thought it was a really ridiculous idea because we forced it upon them. Just like, hey, we're going to work like this now. It looks really stupid. So we set up working groups to discuss how we could actually implement it. The working groups identified issues that could come from working in feature squads, and we came back together to see how we could present it to the team, actually prepared this time. Dramatize your idea. So, who here has seen the infomercial for Hello Nasty by the Beastie Boys? Cool? Few people? So, I'm going to show you a clip of it. It's an absolute work of art. It's really overdone, and it's ridiculous, and it's totally awesome. So, here's a clip.
The following program is a paid advertisement and expresses the opinions of the producers and not necessarily of this network. The Juice Ladies.
And we're back. Hi, I'm Peg. This is Viv.
Did you miss us?
And we're here with the
you.
super juicer today.
We had some trouble last week with the,
Little racy with
we had
raisins.
to rectify those raisins. We had to reduce. But
But
now,
everybody knows us because we have fun with fruit. You know what? Let's invite someone up here with us. They can share in this juice.
I think so.
Do we have a volunteer from the audience? Sir, in the front row?
Actually,
So fun. Come right in here.
how are you feeling
Join us
today?
right in here.
I'm okay.
What's your name, sir?
My name is John.
Oh, John,
John.
that's fun.
Yeah.
Why don't you give that a try? Go on, give it a try.
Fun. Okay.
Wow!
Here, you can.
Now we
Really
have,
good.
we have a surprise for you. We'll love this second.
Woo! Woo! Woo!
Now look what the second machine does. Go on, Viv. Show what the second machine
Now
does.
this machine is my favorite. What happens when we push this button
What happens?
is this.
So, we were sitting there discussing how we were going to present this idea to the team. And I asked the team to watch a snippet of this. It was really funny, actually, because the Scrum Master didn't know how to spell the Beastie Boys. Like, they had no fucking idea what I was doing. But the thing with infomercials is they look into the way of how to actually sell things. So, how to appeal to your audience. There is a really specific formula. And if you have to present something that is this important, that is going to change the way that 60 people work, then make sure you prepare and look into how it's actually going to appeal to them. So, the structure I followed for this was statement of what the problem was, proposal of the solution. I got some testimonials. They were a bit shit, but they were still testimonials. I got concerns of the proposed solution and how the solution takes care of the concerns, and repetition of the solution. Repetition of the solution. You need to repeat things for people to get it. So everyone knew I was using really cheap selling techniques, but I made it fun. It ended up that everyone agreed to work in feature teams because we prepared ourselves to sell the idea, and by including people in the discussions, we helped them feel that the idea was actually theirs. So by this point, we had people working across different components. We had people writing tests, and I was managing the testers, so I'd actually been able to start coaching them, which was cool. It was by this point that we received the news that the bigwigs were coming up from London. So, you can make more friends in 2 months by becoming interested in other people than you can in 2 years by trying to get other people interested in you. We were told that we were going to have an hour with them, and we had to present the technology strategy, the feature team strategy, and the testing strategy. So I didn't do this all by myself at all. I work with a really rad principal engineer who speaks as well, and he'd noted what the higher-ups actually wanted, which could be found in their newsletters. So he based his technology strategy on that, which was ingenious. So he knew what their interests were, and they just absolutely loved it. People will tell you what they like and work with that. So I wasn't that lucky, of course, because these people weren't actually interested in testing. They didn't care. So I had to do things a little bit differently. So, make the other person feel important and do it sincerely. When the higher-ups were coming, I was really excited. I hadn't met them before, and well, if you have them on your good side, you should be able to get funding for your project, so that's pretty exciting. It was a really good opportunity to make a good impression on them. So I brought cake. I brought chocolate, I brought donuts, I bought fucking everything, whatever. People fucking love cake. So if you have a visitor, provide them with food. Make them feel welcome and like you were excited to see them. Because I was. So, actions speak louder than words, and a smile says, I like you. You make me happy. I'm glad to see you. Look at them in their eyes. Shake their hands, smile. They don't know you either, and yes, they might get paid more, but it doesn't mean that they don't want to feel comfortable. Make them feel welcome. I'm really good at doing this. I try really hard, but I get really excited meeting new people. Don't be that intense. So, remember that a person's name is the sweetest sound and most important sound in any language. There were only 3 people that we were actually presenting this to. If you're presenting an idea to a small group of people, call them out by name. Say how wonderful it is to have them there, because it is. They've taken time out of their schedule to come and see you, so make it feel like it was actually worth it. So, although these people didn't really care that much about testing, they left that room really happy and excited about testing. And they listened to me because I made them feel important. And well, I really thought they were important for taking time out of their day. So, I'm going to show you what I presented to them. This is Identity's testing strategy. You can use it for your team as well. It doesn't have to be Sky specific, but this is what I showed them. First off, I'm going to start off with a basic theory of why we test. Testing creates confidence that your product works, or perhaps the avoidance of doubt that your product will break. Sky should be a synonym for quality. We want to ensure that customers can log on to the platform at any time. whether it be to watch Friends at 2 p.m. on a Monday or watch Game of Thrones at 9 p.m. on a Monday night. The identity platform should always be available, frictionless, and secure for the customer. Via performance, load, security, and automation, we can create a Sky product that can be deployed quickly with known quality. Testing also ensures that we are delivering software of value. By aligning with the business on what scenarios are expected within the application, we can deliver a journey-driven solution which adds value to the product. But really, why test? Stable system isn't just for the customers. Working in a vague version of the Spotify model, it isn't only the ops team on call. Team members from all disciplines are on call. Creating a stable, tested piece of software means that your life is easier as a member of the identity team, and you won't be the one woken up at 2 a.m. to keep the system up. It's all very well and good wanting a system that's stable with the minimum amount of show-stopping bugs, but how do we actually create a quality system? Identity want to look at the testing pyramid a little bit differently. We would like to reimagine the test pyramid instead as a bug filter. Only bugs unable to be found by the prior component of testing will be able to reach the next stage of testing. We will cover unit, component, integration, acceptance, end-to-end, and exploratory testing. In the future, I would like to align the bug filter to our continuous deployment pipelines. Unit testing will be the largest layer with the largest amount of tests. Having a large unit testing layer has quite a few benefits. Unit tests are quick to write and run, and they greatly assist when refactoring units of code. If code is written without unit tests, it's very difficult to go back and refactor that code, as the developer will be unable to see if refactoring has broken anything. A component test is a test that limits the scope of the exercise software to a portion of the system under test. Component tests will frequently include mocked or stubbed components so that the tested functionality can be isolated to the component that the developer is interested in testing. Integration tests cover multiple components and will find issues between multiple components speaking to each other. Acceptance tests will be written to the acceptance criteria on a card and written in clear language that can be reused for business documentation for specific areas of functionality. End-to-end tests cover user journeys and will be the journeys that customers are actually making through the product. And exploratory testing will only catch the most subtle bugs that won't be able to be caught via automation. Next, I'm going to be showing you how we are planning to make the Identity Tribe excellent through support and learning. Part of the purpose of the tests is also documentation around the application. The tests create many opportunities for learning, especially sharing knowledge across disciplines. Learning also brings us together and builds better bonds within the team. With strengthened communication, we should be able to work in a more cohesive manner to build better software. Developers and testers pair across a tribe, which promotes cross-learning. The developers learn more about testing, and the testers learn more about development. This also improves quality across the product, as 2 heads on each part of the process is way better than 1. Pairing also allows the sharing of technical knowledge and the development of shared techniques. More consistent code helps remove the mental barrier to exploring a previously written test, allowing the observer to focus on the testing element. Through the Testing Guild, we will be building up a mentoring relationship with the testers. We want to encourage the testers to grow in the right direction, and within Identity, we have many fantastic directions that they can go in. With our team interested in their work, we will be able to deliver better software. So we've started chapterships within the tribe in Identity, where we're bringing all the testers, the Scrum Masters, and the developers together in their retrospective specialisms to share knowledge and discuss common issues and solve them together as a team. We've implemented Fat Fridays, where the tribe can work together to solve issues that we've encountered. During Fat Friday times, we've solved pressing issues like building off branches, Dockerizing some of the applications, and working on test frameworks. This is also a great place for the team to learn together. While mentoring the testing team members, we can focus on where the individual is at the moment and where they actually want to be. If they're interested in security testing, we can pair them with someone in the tribe who has knowledge and recommend some courses to them, for example. We want our team members to be constantly learning and not only be proud of their work, but to be proud of where they work. So, thank you. So the filter, that was Noah Sussman's concept. He's cool. If you don't follow him, do it. And Ash Winter, that's his wheel of testing. He really likes it. It's fun to talk to him about it. Any questions?
So, you're all baffled now, aren't you? Yeah. I am. So, any questions? Yep.
Hey Gwen,
Hi.
thanks for the great talk. When you guys actually started implementing this stuff, like in your place of work?
Yeah, so they were working on it. The test, so that's a really shiny version of how it is, because that was presented to the board. There's still not enough unit tests, there's still, but I've left that team, so I've had to hand that off to someone else, and I'm mentoring the person who was in my position now. So I'm trying to work on another strategy for everyone, because everywhere's a mess, isn't it? Like, yeah, so trying to get everywhere, like, well, all the different teams closer to that vision.
So, do we need to get the question assurance in the works now? Any other questions? Oh.
Hi, Gwen.
Hi.
So the testers that were in the team before you, well, when you arrived, what level of skill did they have in terms of automation to implement this?
Yeah, so they needed a lot of pairing with the developers, and we wouldn't have been able to achieve any of this. So I couldn't write Java. When the testers saw my code, they were like, "What the fuck have you done?" And I'm like, "Well, it works. Please help me. You've got the skills. We can make this excellent together." And that's how we really got people on board. And so it didn't matter too much how much skills the testers had. It mattered that I could get the entire team on board to build a good framework. So the testers had really great skills, exploratory testing skills and stuff like that. But automation, not so much. Yeah, but they do now. They're really cool now. Like, yeah, I'm really proud of what they've done.
Oh, there is. There you go.
From your framework analysis, how did you conclude your framework analysis, and what was your conclusion? Which framework do you now think is optimal for, which will cater all the needs?
So because it's mostly API stuff, we use Gauge and Java. So we use Java because that was mostly what the developers wrote in, so we could get them to help us. If we didn't use Java, like if we did use Ruby or Python or whatever, I don't think it would have been as successful. And I mean, apart from that, it doesn't really matter. Like just writing it in the same language, there isn't a successful framework, there's a successful team and people working together. That is so cheesy. Sorry.
Testing. Hey, Gwen. Great talk, by the way.
Thank you.
Like in production, like failure can happen and issues and stuff like that. Like how can you like mitigate that for future influence? So like you've got managers, for example, that might be saying, you gave us this presentation, this like you know things were going to work, and now it's not. Like how do you mitigate that? Have you had any experience?
So really measurements. So setting a set of measurements. So if you have a look at the State of DevOps reports, they have really good measurements that you can use, so days since last live issue and stuff like that, and just showing that it's getting better. Because if it's not getting better, then you need to look at what you're doing that's not making it better as well. So we've got monitoring up around the office, but not the monitoring that you think of. We've got things like, things like the amount of people that are leaving and stuff like that, that's also part of it. And time from code to live and stuff, yeah.
I have a question regarding how did you tackle the quite usual management question of, now we're, revamping stuff with test automation, but we're probably delivering less features. So how did you address that together?
So we weren't delivering less features really, because before that, testing it was so hard. So we've had time out to test it before we could actually release. And that was, so we took over the project from a different team, and that was how it was done. So the product owners they thought that we were taking longer, but I don't think we were. I didn't see any measurements saying that we were taking longer. I heard people bitching, but not measurements. So yeah. I don't know. I don't think it was that much of a problem. Ash, do you remember it being that much of a problem?
No, because it's more like, again, it's like idea to deployment. If you stick it, a 2 week, so it's like from idea to deploy. If you've got a 2-week regression cycle in front of deploying, then essentially
there's a time already.
Yeah, and the whole team is. That's as fast as you can go as an entire development team, whether you're a developer, a tester, or whatever. Because you're always stuck behind that 2-week regression cycle. So I don't think it slowed anything down either.
So actually, you increased productivity during.
Yeah,
this
we
time.
really increased it. So Ash worked with me, so I saw it. He's not just a randomer.
Okay. Last question.
Hello.
Hi.
We have a challenge that our test framework for user interface testing is so nice that we have a test ice cream cone now that everyone tries to handle everything through user interface tests. So we're trying to turn that around. Did you have a challenge like that?
So no, but so I'm kind of encountering something at the same time, and the way that I try and prove that is via speed. So show the speed of lower layer tests and say how much more, because the developers can't get fast feedback through that, and so they won't, it's pretty much to them running with no tests, because they'll check stuff in and they won't get any feedback really for ages. Also, the team that I'm dealing with now, that I had problems with that. They wanted to use Appium for everything where we need to use different tools. I took them to the BBC. So, and I got the BBC to talk about their issues with testing, and they saw how other people do it, and that changed their mind. So if you can't solve it, get your friends, and take them on a trip somewhere, and it can really help.
All right. Thank you. And thank you for the questions. So it was a really lovely talk. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
And in there is something that will keep you warm and keep you fed.
Amazing. Thank
Thanks.
you.